The Texas justice system is messy, so let's break it down. You're listening to So You Got Arrested, the podcast that tells you what really happens after an arrest. Hosted by BRCK criminal defense attorneys, we talk to the people who've lived it, worked in it, and been shaped by it. Whether you're facing charges or just want to understand your rights, your options, and the smart moves that could change everything, we've got your back.
Well, we're here. We're honored to have a guest with us today, Mr. Joey Contreras. He's famous in the criminal justice system. He handled all the big cases as a DA under Steve Hilbig. Did you start before? Who'd you start?
Hilbig hired me.
Okay, and then he became a federal prosecutor where he handled like some of the biggest, most difficult cases, racketeering, Mexican Mafia cases for the U.S. Attorney's Office until he was eventually appointed to be judge in the 187th. So he's got a unique perspective, and he spent a lot of time as a very revered U.S. attorney. And so he's here today to talk to us a little bit about the federal system, and then we have some things to talk about an indictment that just came down recently.
Yeah. And so how long were you with the U.S. Attorney's Office?
18 years.
Wow. Okay. That's quite a long time. So I've always, been interested in the difference between federal court and state court. And so as a U.S. attorney, what kind of cases would you handle?
Well, of course, there are federal statutes passed by Congress, and Congress, their authority is limited by what the Constitution allows them to. Mm-hmm. There has to be a federal hook to it. And that is the Commerce Clause usually, which means the crime in some way affected interstate commerce. That's all drug cases. That's wire fraud, because everything electronic across the state lines. If I'm talking to you on the phone right now, right, we're crossing state lines because the server or router or something is out of state.
I've seen that. I've seen cases, especially cases involving the internet, where it becomes a federal crime because the server's in California.
That's right.
The case may be.
That's right. Everything is so global now. So that you're talking child pornography, the gun cases, that type of thing.
Okay. Interesting. And so and you said you were with the U.S. Attorney's Office for 18 years?
Yes.
Do you know more or less how many cases you might have handled during that time period?
Over 1,000.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then you were appointed as a state judge.
Correct.
Do you have a preference as to what area of practice you prefer, state court, federal court? Or?
I prefer federal court.
Why is that?
It's kind of touchy, but I might as well be candid here. The level, the expectations are much higher.
I've always viewed federal court as a little more professional, a little more by the book.
It's much more demanding. More is expected of you, and that's not everyone. From the judges who are appointed by the president and approved by the U.S. Senate, they don't just grab people off the street typically. And from the federal prosecutors, I was on the hiring committee, and it was not unusual to have 100 applicants for one position.
Wow.
And you're talking Harvard lawyers and so forth. So my point is that goes from probation to clerks to and the defense counsel. There's so many defense lawyers who do not practice in federal court because they're intimidated by it. And that kind of weeds out, it kind of makes it more of an elite practice.
Absolutely. In fact, I before we started, I was telling you that I just saw you in federal court on, I believe it was Monday, and I was impressed with the way that you carried yourself and your interactions with the court. And I'm on that opposite spectrum of it. I'm one of those intimidated attorneys seeing a guy like you up at the podium saying, I wish I could be more like that guy.
But there's also less shenanigans in federal court.
There's very few shenanigans in federal court.
I was trying a federal case, and I put my client on the stand as a defense attorney, and he started crying. Now, I didn't make him cry, but the jury got taken out, and I got yelled at because my client cried on the stand. And I didn't say anything, but I felt like saying, I don't have any control over that.
Is that
judge.
When you approached the witness and you started pinching him, or you started hurting him?
In the Del Rio division of federal court, this is for real. I wish I had a picture to show you. There's a sign outside of the courtroom that says, "No crying."
Okay. Really?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Now, with regard to the way that cases are handled, I have, some experience in federal court, but it's very limited, especially compared to guys like you and Scott. But it does feel like cases are handled very differently in federal court as opposed to state court. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Yes. Number one, you start from the inception. The cases are worked up by federal agents almost always. Federal agents tend to be higher caliber, more highly educated, and better trained. So their work product is very, very good. And the cases are very carefully screened before they're ever indicted. So you're talking about cases in which guilt is almost always very strong, if not overpowering.
So the evidence is much stronger than you might find in like a state court.
There's no comparison.
Okay.
Yeah. In state court, you routinely run across cases in which you say, how did this get indicted?
Right.
All the time.
Scott speaks to that.
But sometimes because what happens is the agents, because it's the same police officers, SAPD may bring a case to the feds, and the feds say, you don't have enough here, and then they file it with the state, and the state indicts it.
Happens all the time, every day.
Yeah. And so, you have discretionary jurisdiction.
We were complete discretion.
And I've also noticed that some of the, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the timelines feel a little different as well. It feels like in federal court, once a case makes its way into court, it seems to move a little more quickly than a case in state court might move.
It moves very quickly. It moves very, very quickly. What's interesting, though, is speaking of timelines, if you broaden that out, I've handled at least one case in which the investigation took 3 years, but it was indicted. And this was a RICO case, racketeering, very complex. In state court, there probably would have been 3 years of delays with a case in which 25 murders were alleged in one indictment.
Wow.
That would have probably been delayed for years.
Okay.
We were before a jury in less than a year.
Oh, and why is that? Like, how is the federal court able to do that?
Because the defense counsel and the prosecution cannot delay cases without having a compelling reason. Simple as that.
So it's a matter of the judges kind of holding everybody's feet to the fire.
Nonstop.
Yeah. And I imagine, having practiced at that level for 18 years, that sounds like a pretty demanding type of job.
When you indict, as a prosecutor, when you indict a case, be ready to go to trial next week, theoretically. You won't go to trial in a week. But when you indict it, be prepared to try it. That means you have your case ready to go.
Now, I've heard it said that in federal court, on like a speedy trial, in theory, if you allege or invoke your speedy trial rights, you may be entitled to a trial within 70 days, or there's some short time frame that we really, seems a lot faster than we might encounter in state court.
I believe it's 20 days.
Is it 20 days?
Yes.
Wow.
If you want a trial, they will give it to you.
So the prosecutor has to be ready to go from the time that case is indicted.
He does and is.
Okay. And in terms of indicting these federal cases, how does that process work? Because I know like grand juries here in Texas, it's 12 on state cases. Is that different in federal court? How does that work?
No, the system is basically the same. You have a group of citizens. You need 12 for a quorum, but it can be 18, 24 people. Same as state court.
Okay.
You just need 12 for a quorum to return an indictment.
And how many have to vote in favor of indicting?
12.
Okay. So it has to be at least 12.
Yes.
Okay.
And let me tell you a principal difference between the two is in state court. I've indicted cases in state court when I was an assistant DA, and they'll walk in there with literally shopping baskets full of cases to be indicted because it is a sausage factory. An assembly line. Turn them, it's Lucille Ball in the candy factory.
Right.
That's how fast they indict cases.
Right.
In federal court, they don't just do a 30-second presentation of, this guy had a gun in his waistband. He's a felon. We're going to leave the room and you vote. They actually use witnesses.
Okay.
They call the agent to the stand and question him.
Okay.
So it's like a mini trial.
So it's much more involved.
Much more involved.
And is that, I would imagine, because you've described that when you're prosecuting these cases in federal court, by the time you're going to that grand jury, your case is prepped and pretty much ready to go.
Absolutely, it is.
Wow. Okay.
So how often do the grand jurors ask the agent questions?
It's a rare thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I'm assuming that unlike the state DA's office where intake is taking cases to grand jury and then the trial division gets the case afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same person, the U.S. attorney that presents it to grand jury is handling it all the way through?
It's what's called vertical prosecution. If I'm on duty as the prosecutor, when they make an arrest, I will be picking a jury on that case, and I will approve that arrest. So that's why it's totally hands-on.
You're seeing it all the way through?
All the way through.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting.
And so as far as, what you like the federal system better? What is the differences what are the pros and cons of state versus federal?
The state court, what I do like about state court is you have jury sentencing, which means, and Texas being Texas, it's enthralled of juries. You know, Texas is the only state where juries can decide family law matters and child termination. Other states don't do that.
Yeah.
And punishment too is very rare that you would trust a jury to decide punishment, except for death penalty cases. Texas lets juries decide everything. And what I liked as a prosecutor, as a defense lawyer too, is that you can have a jury, you can make your appeal to the jury one way or the other on what the appropriate punishment is. Federal court, the judge determines it, and your hands are your freedom is very much more limited on your latitude on what you could argue, what you could do. This judge is not going to be very amenable to emotional appeals. Right. You're not going to be as a federal judge.
Right.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, here in Texas in state court, you have your jury trial. And if you're convicted by the jury can also determine your punishment. Right. But it's different in federal court.
Judge always determines punishment.
Now, one of the things, though, I wanted to mention is that, one of the pluses that I've heard talked about in the federal system, and if you pick up a drug case or a certain amount of drugs, whether it's in Illinois or whether it's in San Antonio, the sentencing guidelines are the same. Whereas in state court, because I landed in the one at 186th, a prosecutor may give me a very different offer than if I was in the 399th. So the federal system kind of takes all that out of it and makes it more uniform?
Uniform nationally.
Right.
Yeah. What sentencing guidelines that will determine your sentence are the same across the whole country, including Guam and the Virgin Islands. And so there is this uniformity to sentencing. Whereas in the United States, you go one county over and you may get 50 years will get you probation in San Antonio. Right. You go one state over and something may not even be illegal, like weed. In Texas, they want to send you to prison for having a weed cartridge.
Right.
It's called the federalism system.
Because we talk about that here, the difference between Bexar County and Comal County.
Oh, yes.
that you don't want to get in trouble. We tell all the clients, don't ever get in trouble in Comal County.
Yeah, that's a different sovereignty.
And one of the things that I thought was interesting in federal court that I had to get used to was obviously in state court, we can get a plea bargain for our clients by negotiating with the state prosecutor. And hey, if you offer my client probation, he'll take it. But it doesn't really work that way in the feds.
You're absolutely right. There, for all intents and purposes, there is no plea bargaining in the federal system.
Right. You're just taking responsibility.
You're just accepting responsibility, and you make a plea for a lower sentence. But the prosecutor is not going to make you any promises.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is a very different system in that regard.
Very different.
Yeah.
All right. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the independence of the Department of Justice.
Okay.
And I know there's some interesting things that are happening about that. But before we take this break, I wanted to. You have a new book that just came out. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. This is my fourth book, and let me just tell you that I've written 4 books, and they all revolve around fictional criminal type cases.
Oh, wow.
And it's not real hard for me because I have so much material to work that I can borrow from. But the fourth one is When the Sun Doesn't Rise. I'm sorry. And it's a little bit different, and it's out. They're all available on Amazon. Some people say that it's their favorite. The second one to me is the best, but make you have to decide.
And so people, if they're interested in purchasing these books, they can just go on Amazon and search her name, Joey Contreras.
Yeah, but there's a singer named Joey Contreras. I don't think he's any good
That's
either.
not you?
No, that ain't me. No, I can sing better. No, put Joey Contreras author and it'll bring you right there.
Okay.
All right, we're going to take a break and we'll be back.
The attorneys at BRCK Criminal Defense have helped over 5,000 clients move on with their lives. When an arrest or accusation turns your life upside down, we have the knowledge, experience, and integrity to get your life back on track. Traditional legal ethics, modern legal tactics, the best defense possible to get you through the criminal justice system. Search BRCK Criminal Defense to see our reviews and find out why so many of our clients have trusted us to fight for them. BRCK Criminal Defense, helping our clients move on with their lives.
Okay, so one of the things that I know we want to discuss today is the importance of and if I'm mischaracterizing, but the importance of the independence of the Department of Justice. And by independence, I mean a lot of times we hear in social media and all that people are being prosecuted for political reasons. So why is it? First of all, do you feel like the Department of Justice has always been independent, and why is that so important?
The Department of Justice was, before there was the Department of Justice, what you had was U.S. attorneys that were spread out across the country, and they were largely independent, and they had no real supervision. And this was when the country was much younger in the 1800s. So right after the Civil War, they created the Department of Justice to have a supervising agency. And what people came to recognize is, let's first of all define what the Department of Justice does. They are the official attorney, not for the president,
right,
for the United States.
Right.
The president appoints the attorney general, but that does not mean the attorney general answers. And that goes to your question about the independence of the Justice Department. Since the days of its creation and through its evolution, the independence of the Department of Justice has become more and more recognized as critical. And the reason for that is that you want a body of prosecution that is no way influenced by politics, that no one brings any pressure to bear. You want them operating independently. You don't want the attorney general being told who to prosecute by the president or any member of the cabinet or anything like that. That it contaminates the whole system. It has to be independent. It has to follow the evidence and the law.
Right. Prosecuting the offense and not the person.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And at a much smaller level, which is nothing compared to the stuff that you've done in your career. For a while, I was a municipal court prosecutor in a small town in South Texas. And I remember I had this case where a local elected official was being prosecuted for public intoxication. And so I tried the case and we got a hung jury. And after we had the hung jury, I'm not going to say who it was, but I did have an administrator come to me and say, we want you to try him again. And I was a young attorney and I tried him again. We got another hung jury. And this administrator came to me and said, we want you to try him again. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I refused. And I'll be honest, I don't know that I would have tried him the second time, but for this administrator who was not a prosecutor, who was not a lawyer, telling me, we want you to try this elected official again. I always look back on that and regret that I didn't know enough or, stand up and say, no, I'm not going to do that. This isn't a good enough case. So that kind of is in line with what you're talking about.
It is. And that you bring up, we just discussed the Justice Department and the urgent need for independence. Let's compare it to a local district attorney's office that is headed by a politician,
right,
an elected district attorney who only serves when they get a majority of the votes, when the voters are in favor of them. You don't think that's going to influence their actions? Of course. Politics?
Yeah.
It's going to influence every daily decision they make. And they wanted, the goal was to immunize the Department of Justice. When I was in the Assistant United States Attorney's Office, it never crossed my mind that we may be stepping on toes. At one point, I was head of the Civil Rights Division. And I investigated a lot of police misconduct. That's a hot potato, Scott. You could talk about that. Hot potato politics, incredible hot politics locally. With us, we couldn't care less what department they were with, what their chief of police wanted, how the district attorney would feel about it. What did the evidence say, and what did the law say?
Right.
That was our only concerns.
Right.
So it's critical that the Department of Justice be independent. Bottom line.
Right.
So with the indictment that has come out on Comey, what concerns do you have about that?
Concerns is an extreme understatement.
Okay.
Let me preface this by telling y'all, I'm unusual. I'm defense. I do defense work now, but I'm conservative. I'm a conservative. I always have been, and I am not just concerned, disgusted by the political influence or pressure and coercion that was brought to bear on the Attorney General and the Department of Justice to go after the political enemies of our sitting president. That is something that happens in a third world country, not America, where you say, punish my enemies, people I don't like.
Right.
And the Department of Justice does it.
Right. They had never done that before.
The only time that has ever happened, Scott, and you're too young, you probably weren't born, was Nixon. You have to go to the Hall of Shame.
Right.
When Nixon ordered his attorney general to do this and to do that.
Was that during Watergate?
Yes, Watergate. It led to Watergate. And that was a dark period of time. And we tried to get past that. We will never, when it was over, President Gerald Ford said, our long nightmare is over. Well, guess who just resurrected the nightmare? Our sitting president, and as a conservative, or as an American, I am just disgusted by it. I think I revere the Department of Justice and their integrity, but that integrity has been completely compromised, that they are initiating and pursuing a political prosecution at the behest of a president because the president doesn't like the defendant.
So, it's a situation where instead of a case being raised by an offense where it's like, hey, this offense has occurred, we need to look into it. You may be just looking at certain people to see what can you find or what is there, or, I want you to go after this person.
Steve, to me, it's more nuanced than that. Okay. Let's say Comey is guilty as hell. You know what? That's besides the point. If I pull a person over because they're black or Hispanic and they have drugs, they're guilty. Don't you think that prosecution is a little tainted? And doesn't his guilt become a side issue? What's real issue is the motivation and improper conduct of its initiation. In this case, the prosecution of Comey may be guilty as hell. He may be found guilty. I don't know, and I don't care.
Right.
It's the motivation for going after him that so turns my stomach.
Right.
Have you had the opportunity to see the actual indictment?
I have read the indictment.
So does the indictment on its face sound reasonable, or is there concerns about the indictment, or is that beside the point?
No, there are concerns. I say it's besides the point, but we might as well get into it.
Yeah.
That cases with the Department of Justice, like we discussed earlier, are screened very carefully and worked up very carefully. And you can imagine how much work went into going after a former director of the FBI.
Okay.
I bet they assigned 100 agents to it. Wow. I bet you that case has been worked up and down like it was a Nuremberg war crimes. And every single federal prosecutor looked at it and said, there's not enough evidence here. Every one of them. Even the sitting U.S. attorney, who was a Republican conservative, said, I can't indict this man. There's no evidence. And guess what? All of a sudden, the case became strong when, over the weekend, Trump said, indict this man, Bondi, Attorney General Bondi. That's troubling.
Yeah.
Well, and what kind of stands out to me is the fact that U.S. attorney for that jurisdiction was either resigned or was forced to resign.
Somewhere in between.
Right. And I don't know how that works, whether they're fired or they're just asked to leave or they leave
Because
on their
they're
own.
civil service protected, right? Oh, not the attorney general themselves.
The U.S. attorney is not. He's a political appointee and he can be kicked out at will.
But all the people underneath it.
Yes, they have strong civil service protections. Listen, my prediction is there's a whole lot of federal prosecutors and federal agents who are going to be getting their jobs back when this is all said and done. You cannot just fire people willy-nilly because you're the president. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can in Haiti or something, but not here.
Right. Yeah.
Well, you can in Bexar County when if you're the DA, you get that we have to reapply for our job each cycle.
Well, we're in employment at will, and we had you have no protection,
right.
But feds now have a lot of protections.
Yeah.
And so you talked about kind of this policy that was put into place after Watergate of not going after political enemies. Is that something that's written down, or is that just kind of an unwritten rule?
No, it is not written down. The only place it is written is the U.S. Attorney's Department of Justice manual.
Okay.
We will not be affected by any political influence. You will make no contact or have communications with anyone who holds office in regard to a case.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, very strict rules on maintaining that wall separating between prosecution and politics.
Okay.
So it's not in a law per se, it's historical. And it didn't start just with Watergate. Watergate highlighted the need for it, but it has been tradition for decades and decades and decades, generations.
Okay. Yeah, because I could imagine it would be of benefit to, say, any elected official to go to the Department of Justice and say, hey, I want you to open up an investigation on my opponent. That way, during this election, they're under investigation, or whatever the case may be, or bring a case against them, even if it doesn't lead to anything. I mean, just the specter of that hanging over somebody may be an issue during an election.
It could influence an election, or it could bring ill repute on the system if a president, for example, were to say, you know what, I don't want you drop this prosecution and investigation of my son, whose name is Hunter, by the way. But listen, they took him to trial,
right? And
Biden sat silent. People may have problems with Biden, but the man did not interfere brazenly like Trump did.
Right. And of course, you say this from the perspective of being a conservative. I'm sure you weren't a fan of President Biden and everything that he was doing.
I wasn't a big fan of his, but I got to call it as it is. I respect that I have read how much it pained him. He has lost so much that it was killing him that Hunter was being prosecuted and it was suffering. But he let ultimately he pardoned him, but that's a whole different issue. But he let the jury found him guilty. And Biden sat in his home, probably in a dark room, and did nothing. Didn't pick up the telephone.
Let it play out.
Call the Department of Justice.
Right. Yeah.
So because there's even, because I remember, so federal employees, they get told they can't really participate in elections. Well, I don't know. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yes, it's a statute called the Hatch Act that you cannot participate in any political activities as part of your work.
Got it.
In other words, you cannot use a work email to receive or send political messages. But there's even unwritten rules. They don't like you contributing money to candidates.
Okay.
You never see a federal prosecutor, almost never, at a political fundraiser.
Right.
It's almost like federal judges who stop socializing and attending any political functions once they're appointed. There's no rule that says that you can't, but they just don't like the appearance.
You're supposed to be above the fray.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because Judge Ray Olivari, his birthday was a birthday party, and it was a birthday party fundraiser, and his wife was a federal probation officer, and she showed up for the party and told everybody very clearly, I am only here for the birthday part. I am not part of the fundraiser. I'm going to leave if anybody talks about fundraising. That's how seriously the federal employees took all that.
Yeah, that's right. That's a very good example.
Everybody's everybody I've ever dealt with in the federal system is very conscientious about it.
Yeah.
So are we going to find our way out of this, or is it going to get worse?
I always have hope for this country. we'll find our way out of it.
Absolutely.
It's a great way to end the episode. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me. I really
appreciate it. Thank
enjoyed
you. It's a
it.
very interesting topic, very interesting conversation. We'd love to have you back. So this has
Anytime.
been So You Got Arrested with BRCK Criminal Defense with Steve Barrera, Joey Contreras, and Scott Simpson. Thank you all for listening.
Be safe.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to So You Got Arrested. If you found this podcast helpful, share it with someone who needs to hear it. For more legal insights and real talk from the front lines of the Texas justice system, follow us and subscribe. And remember, BRCK Criminal Defense has your back. For more information, visit us at brckdefense.com.